We hear it everywhere. Stress management is important. Mental fitness, mental health has reached its peak, and we need to take care of it. But how do we do that? In today's episode with my main man, Anthony Pinto, and your servant, Jerry Tavares here, we're going to be discussing on how do we manage stress. One point can be having stress at your job or your 9 to 5. But what if you're an entrepreneur? What if you're a small business and you have to wear 1,000 different hats? Exaggerating, but you know what I mean. Or what about if you're self-employed and you don't know where your next job is going to come from, especially now with how the economy is fluctuating so much? So in this episode, we're going to take a different shift, and we're going to be talking about from that perspective, because as Tony and I, we're both self-employed. We have our own businesses, and we're also going to touch on our clients who work at a regular job, 9 to 5, 35, 40 hours a week. And we're going to make it as insightful as possible so that you can start managing your stress. Tony, let's talk about managing stress. Let's go with a regular job for our clients who work at large companies.
Okay. So I guess, over since the pandemic, right? Stress levels have gone through the roof. And now people are coping with so many new technology changes and advances. Jobs are, being lost. And people are struggling to make ends meet also, right? So the question is, number one, what is stress? Yeah, I mean, stress can be defined in so many different ways. And how you define it also can determine how you deal with it. But to me, the simple definition of stress is what we get is what we get is not what we expect. Yeah. And when there's a gap there, your expectations and your what you really want can create stress, right? But ultimately, I guess, stress is a choice at the end of the day. If you think about it, if we take ownership of everything that we think about, because everything only has the meaning we give to it, then we are giving meanings to everything that we experience. And when we give it a meaning that is not useful to us and it's unresourceful, then we create stress. Yeah. Now, of course, from the perspective of my practice of neurosemantics alone itself says neuro meaning your neurology, semantics means the meanings you make. So the meanings that we make, we push into our neurology naturally, and that drives our behavior, right? And that's where the stress comes. And I think that I found that, that really very simple frameworks that we need to have in mind when we want to deal with stress. One is, of course, our thinking errors, right? And thinking errors come in three key areas. One is a cognitive distortion. We all have cognitive distortion. So what is cognitive distortion? When you start focusing on the negatives all the time. That's a cognitive distortion. Everything doesn't work. Things are not what we expect them to be. And we think only about the negative. That's a cognitive distortion. That's number one. Number two is cognitive biases. We all have, as we grew up, we adopted different belief systems and all that, and we hold to those belief systems, and some of them may not be serving us, right? But we are biased in that sense. So and there could be limiting beliefs also, right? So that's another thinking error. And the third thinking error, big one, is the cognitive fallacy, which means making, wrong judgments, wrong conclusions, maybe without facts, right? And today, a lot of what are the big cognitive fallacies happening? We're getting a lot of fake news, and we're basing decisions on a lot of fake news, and then we get stressed on that. Yeah, so cognitive distortions, cognitive biases, and cognitive fallacies are really the root cause of all the stresses that we create for ourselves because of these thinking errors. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I'm not sure where the source is, but two big frames is this, right? We experience a lot of stress whenever any situation we're faced with. We use the framework of the 3 Ps, right? We have an experience, that doesn't serve us, we make it very personal. We make it very pervasive, and we make it very permanent. So if something goes wrong, we take full responsibility. Sometimes it's not our fault, but we say, "Oh, I'm not good enough. I'm bad. I'm not good at this. Or, I didn't do this. I didn't do that." We make it very personal, and then we make it pervasive, which means that oh, I'm like this everywhere in my life. Yeah, I cannot operate. Anywhere you go in my life, I'm going to be like that, and we make it permanent, which means that we can never change it. It's going to be like that all the time. Yeah.
Well, how this is good that you're saying all of this. But for the people who are listening, we have to simplify it, because in order for them not to get lost in that, to illustrate an example of what Tony is saying, as I was driving with a friend of mine, we were driving to the golf range, and I asked him, "So, how is your new job going?" And he said, "Oh, it's going really well. I'm really happy, but there's a lot of work to do." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I have to do the trainings during the day, and then in the evenings, I have to do the back office stuff, and it's really long hours." And I said, "Are you able to transfer that time into free time?" He says, "No, I'm just doing it for doing it." And that for me is what incited me to ask a question. I said, "Oh, is this required by your job?" And he said, "No, I just do it because I want to be a perfectionist, and I want to make sure I want to deliver something great, and I put the pressure on myself." And that is the key right there for everybody who's listening. Where are you putting pressure to deliver or to perform at a level that is not necessary? Tony touched that at the beginning, and it was like, it's about the expectation. So if your expectation is up here, but the ability is here, there's a gap. And that's what's going to cause that stress to happen. So for everybody who is listening right now, including ourselves, and I have to check myself quite often and say, do I have the right expectation? Do I have the bar set at the level that is accurate to the situation? Because that's where a lot of the stress can come in. We want to overperform in situations where it is not possible at that moment. It requires different tools, different time, different resources, which we don't have. And most of the time, we're not conscious about that. And therefore, we just push through, even though we're destined to fail using that setup. So that's the question that I would pose for the people who are listening in this podcast right now.
Jeury, you just described a very strong cognitive bias or limiting belief, right? Yeah. Because they have this limiting belief that I've got to be at that level, and if I'm not, and then also being pervasive and permanent, all of that comes in. That is, is framing it that way. So it's a question of, number one, if you have limiting beliefs like that, and it's keeping you stressed so regularly, then you got to work on how to remove that limiting belief and replace it with an empowering belief. Now, you think about it, a belief is just a thought we confirm to be true. Which means that, okay, he's got this belief that I've got to be perfect all the time. And he says, if I'm perfect all the time, then I am who I am. And that may not be true. But it's true for him now, but it doesn't serve him, right? So then you got to be able to say, okay, how do you remove that limiting belief? Actually, it's quite simple, actually. And the basic process that we use in NLP is that since you confirm that limiting belief or thought to be true, you can also choose to disconfirm it to be true, right? So if we go through a process of just putting it into a neurology and just re-emphasizing, reframing that it's not true. Yeah. You don't want it anymore. By really, turning up the negative effects of that belief, and you don't want it anymore. Right? But you got to replace it with an empowering belief that's going to serve you. Yeah. I mean, I had that particular, stress situation where when I make decisions, right, long time ago, I used to really stress myself out getting as much information as I can without kind of stopping, And so, number one, the decision is late. Number two, I'm so stressed out getting the information, right? But I believe that was necessary. And when I went through the process and I said, wait a minute, can I make these decisions with only 70, 80% of the information anyway? Because you can't predict everything that's going to come out, right? And when I went through the process and this confirmed that thought and took on the new empowering belief, it was such a relief. It's a reframing exercise, right? By reframing the idea, I was able to then tell myself, okay, 70% is good enough. And then it helped me make good decisions, and I can iterate. As soon as you can make a decision, you can just correct it, because nobody makes perfect decisions anyway. So all of that kind of, belief systems, that, as I said, cognitive biases, fallacies, and distortions, right? For example, the other one you heard is that, this person makes me angry all the time, right? Now, okay, we think about that in terms of our practice of linguistics, right? Makes me angry. So, how does someone make you angry when you choose to be angry, right?
Yeah.
What do you mean I chose to be angry? He said something, right? So that's a cognitive distortion, yeah?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what we mean.
And in that same aspect, the responsibility on the emotion and the actions is given to the other person, which is the external stimulus.
Yeah.
So why does that person make you angry, but what happens in another country doesn't? So you choose what makes you and not makes you angry, in a sense. So it's all a choice. But you need to be conscious about that and internally know that it is a choice. And going back to the limiting beliefs, I just wanted to say that we need to check in with our identity, because we want to create a certain identity about ourselves and try to live up to that standard. And we sometimes don't even realize that we're trying to keep this identity. Let's say the perfectionism. I was discussing with someone that I would love to do construction work because I love to work with my hands. But my limiting belief is that I'm a perfectionist. So I'm never going to be happy. And I have tried it before, and I get caught in the situation because it's not the way that a master professional would do it, and it doesn't look it, and therefore I'm not happy, which is a choice that I am choosing to feel that way. Right?
Yeah.
But it takes me a while for me to go through the emotional roller coaster and then realize, wait a second, my expectation is to be like a master construction worker, yet I haven't even done one project in my life professionally. So how am I? It's like when I go play golf, it's like, how do I expect to beat Tiger Woods or like how? But in some sense, we get angry because our expectations is not where our reality is. And we need to always check in with that stuff. And let's switch a little bit more to the entrepreneurial side and the self-employment side, because as a self-employed person, we have to wear a lot of hats: marketing, sales, customer relationships, taxes, you name it, we have to deal with it. So how do we keep our stress low, and how do we try to stay in the flow state as much as possible, Tony?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things of small business owners and self-employed people, right? For me, it's about, number one, isolation and loneliness, right? So because they're working on their own, and they can't get everybody on board to what they're thinking about, because they're self-employed, you're a small business owner, right? So it's very important to have a support group. The small business owner or the self-employed person needs to be part of a small support group that can give them the social connections to help them kind of work through the tough times. I think that's really very important. I think people miss that one, right? Especially small business owners and self-employed people. So get into groups, get into networks of, similar people, and exchange challenges, exchange difficult situations. Somebody has a solution, somebody has done that before. That's the first thing, I think. Yeah. I mean, a lot of this face a lot of different stress, right? So the question is, what are the lifestyle practices that we need to have that will keep us on the path of, being able to deal with stress? We cannot get rid of stress, right? It's part of life, right? I mean, it's part of growing up. So, when we are challenged like that, I think one of the other things that's really important is to get away from the negative mindset, or I say the cognitive distortions, right? Is to have a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. I mean, is it Carol Dweck, is it, that talks about this quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
But the growth mindset is all about learning. It's all about growing. It's all about taking knocks that we need to take, right? You don't grow a muscle by just not lifting weights, right? You have to lift heavier and heavier weights to grow muscle, right? So you need the resistance. So when we look at setbacks and challenges that we face, these are opportunities for us to grow. So that reframing has to happen.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, and as we say in our mindfulness practice or positive intelligence practice, right? You can look at all the what they call limitations, the what you call the saboteurs that we call.
Correct.
Thinking that sabotages our thinking or unconscious most of the time. Or we can look at situations and say, okay, how can I find the gift and opportunity in this challenging situation? Because there's always something there that's going to work for us, right? So it's a question where we choose to stick. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is such an important point for everybody who is listening right now, because you have a stimulus or something that can cause stress. And let's say it's a stressful situation. But the idea is to think about it. Do I think about it from a negative perspective? And I say, oh, I don't want to do this. This is so annoying. Oh, it's not going to work. Or do you shift and say, wait a minute. This stress has nothing to do with my identity and my limiting beliefs. This is only a situation in my trajectory towards success and greatness. How can I use it as an opportunity to grow? How can I use it as an opportunity to learn? And it is really important that when we're doing this, that we think about what is the job that needs to be done? Because most of the times we get so stressed out at things that don't even matter. They don't even move the needle forward. And we waste so much time in negative emotions, in things that don't matter. So we need to get clear on what is the job that needs to be done, as my man Tony loves to use this phrase because it is so true. And then shift and look at it from a neutral perspective and say, wait a second, how can I use this as an opportunity to grow? And the reason why I wanted to bring that up, Tony, this is your topic, right? But I wanted to bring it up is because you need to know what game you're playing. As an entrepreneur, as a self-employed person, it is very different than when you work for a large organization with 1,000 moving parts, but you're only responsible for one little one. So when you are self-employed, you need to know what game are you playing? Where are your customers? What are the real problems? Where can you market to them? How do you set up meetings with them? How does the tendering process work? How do contracts work? You need to know how the game works so that you can streamline that and not get stressed out by things that don't matter, because deep down, you don't know how the game works.
Yeah. And you know what? As you said that, the other thing that, self-employed people, business owners need to be able to do is to ask for help when they need it. Yeah. And that requires vulnerability, right? We're not Superman, we know we're not, right? But we believe, we want to have a belief that we can. So, having the vulnerability and humility to ask for help from the right people, it's amazing how that works, because as we ask for that help, they might also see that we can help them in a different way too. And that exchange then happens, you see. And too many people, just avoid that because they can't handle the I guess the vulnerability that's required. Yeah. And as you said, lifestyle also, right? I mean, are you getting enough sleep or not?
Yeah.
Are you having a healthy, eating diet, and, Are you exercising? Are you also taking time off for reflection? Self-reflection is so important. Do you think about, okay, in the last week or in the last day or at the end of today, what were the things that I faced and how did I deal with that? That increasing time for reflection is also very important, right? And I said, exercise, and of course the practice of mindfulness. Yeah, the practice of mindfulness really is to train our mind to be present. I mean, Harvard University did this research and said 47% of the time our mind is wandering.
It's somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and when we wander, then we allow our unconscious frames of mind or mindset to come in and take over, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we mean by those, cognitive distortions, fallacies, and biases, right?
Yeah.
They are largely unconscious. Yeah.
Yeah. And our brain is supposed to keep us safe. So when we let it run on its own, it's going to create multiple scenarios where things can go wrong, which is going to give you even more stress for things that have not even happened in real life. As you said, a thought converted into truth. All right. So we need to be present with mindfulness and all the other tools that you mentioned. I cannot remember right now. But we need to stay present in the now so that we can take control of the mind. It's beautiful.
And I say it's the mind, not the brain.
Yes, the mind. Yes.
Anatomy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tony, this has been very insightful. I hope that you meaning people who are listening, also have found it insightful. If you have any questions, you can reach out to Tony here on LinkedIn or on YouTube, or to me as well. We're here to help out, and we want to spread this topic because many people are not speaking about it. The reason why I wanted to do this topic, Tony, I forgot to tell you why, and this is for everybody listening. There is someone who doesn't listen to this podcast, so I can say this story. There's someone that is back in Germany and is not feeling well because this person noticed how great it was in this other country and is coming back. It is not feeling well emotionally. And a colleague of this person was talking to me about this person and saying what he was seeing in this person. And all I could think about was, why is this person telling me this instead of going to the person and say, hey, John, I see that something is not right. Can we talk about it? Can I help you? And offering assistance. Because we're seeing people stressed out. And I know that they're maybe afraid to seek help, as Tony mentioned. But at the same time, I would say as human beings, it's also our duty to go to them and say, hey, John, I see something going on. How can I help you? Talk to me about it. And offer a hand, because you will be surprised how much these people would be thankful that someone is actually talking to them and they can open up about this, because it's consuming them inside. So this is why I wanted to bring this topic up. If you see someone, help. And if you can help, because we need to just collaborate as a community so that we can bring the entire world up.
Be a good listener. Just ask and listen.
What?
Don't prescribe, don't recommend. Just ask and listen first.
Yeah.
And need to know the situation first before we... Sometimes some of them may even need therapy,
Yeah.
because of the onslaught of the change that they go through. Yeah. Yeah. So, it's conversation. As I said, loneliness, getting help, having people. Yeah, great. Yeah, Jeury, I think you did a very good thing that, this is something that people need to be aware of. And it's getting more and more out there. Yeah. But knowing who you can go to for some help is important also.
Yeah. So if you see this video, spread the message, spread the word, repost this, and share it with somebody that should listen to this.